So I think we could wait maybe for 1 more minute and then I do the introduction.
That sounds right and good. So welcome all who are already in the call. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I have not yet released the recording of Vipin Sridharan's talk from last month. That is due to a busy schedule and other things. So the recording from last month will go online and we will put the link on the website very soon, probably this week. And if all goes well, today's presentation will also be placed on YouTube for you to rewatch and share.
Okay, then I guess I can begin. Okay, so hello everyone. So today is a pleasure to introduce a colleague of mine who will give the talk today, and that's Jens Saak. And Jens studied industrial mathematics in Bremen and did a PhD at the Technical University of Chemnitz in 2009, if I'm correct. And since then, he is a research scientist and also a technical associate at the Max Planck Institute for the dynamics of complex technical systems in Magdeburg. And one of his research foci is the development of software, in particular for model order reduction and scientific computing in general. So together with others, he has written quite well-cited paper on reproducibility, replicability, and reusability for software and scientific computing. And for a couple of years, there is also a research initiative going on this topic in Germany. And that's what he will be talking about today. So Jens, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Matthias. So yeah, also welcome from my side, and many thanks for having me in the first place. As Matthias already mentioned, I'm going to talk a bit about this research data initiative. I'll not go too much in detail about the global scale, so the National Research Data Initiative, but I'll introduce the Mathematical Research Data Initiative that is part of this MaRDI, and I'm especially going to focus on activities in the task area 2 on scientific computing, and there even more specifically on the one measure that I am involved in. Inside this task area 2, or especially this benchmarking measure that I'm focusing most of my talk on, there are a couple of other people that have been involved in these things. On the one hand, the principal investigator is Peter Benner, the director of our institute, or the mathematical department of the institute. I will be talking a bit about the model reduction benchmarking tool. That is what Catherine Lund is mostly working on. And so the majority of the work presented here is actually due to her. And then there are a lot of grayed out names here. Those are all people who either have helped as student assistants or are former members of the group, like Christian Himpe and Tim Mitchell, who have contributed to the big picture behind this all quite a bit. And at the end of the talk, there will be even more names and more faces of all the other people involved in task area 2. Right, so what am I planning to speak about? I want to introduce MaRDI first, and especially our scientific computing task area inside there. And although that is only one bit on the outline here, that will take up quite some time of the presentation, I guess. And then I want to go a bit deeper into this measure 2.3 MaRDI mark, where we are concerned with benchmarking of mathematical experiments, basically, the software on certain data. And the other points down here are sort of, in the one way or the other, contributing to this to the goals of this this measure. So let's start with MaRDI, and MaRDI stands for the Mathematical Research Data Initiative. So it's the only one inside the National Research Data Initiative that has the math covered. And I'll go a bit on an overview of what the task area itself is. So MaRDI. MaRDI is one out of the 27 currently funded consortia inside the National Research Data Initiative. And the big picture is federal funding of something like 90 million euros over a period of 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. And there are like 26 out of these 27 consortia are basically somewhere located in the different research fields, and one is the base services that is covering cross-cutting topics. So MaRDI is the one consortium that is concerned with mathematics and mathematics as a whole. So covering the full bandwidth from basic mathematics to very applied and industrial mathematics in the different task areas, and we'll get to those in a second. We have 16 institutions and partners involved. The pictures can be seen over here. Among the partners, the German Mathematical Union, the International Applied Mathematics and Mechanics Association, the Operations Research Association, and Imaginary and non-profit organization featuring open and interactive mathematics, and also the Mathematical Research Institute in Oberwolfach. And all the others here are the actual working members, like the institutions that do the real work. So the Max Planck Institute I am at is over here, but also the Max Planck Institute for Mathematics and the Sciences in Leipzig is involved, and many other institutions across Germany. To mention also the University in Münster, who is our partner in Task Area 2. The project has been running for roughly 2 years now. In fact, in 2 weeks from now, we'll have our second General Assembly, or our second annual meeting. So the third full assembly, again at the Weierstrass Institute in Berlin, who's the spokesperson's institution in our consortium. Across these 16 institutions, we have 20 full-time equivalent employees, meaning in total there are more persons working, but partially on part-time contracts. And we've been funded in this first period for 5 years with the option to apply for 5 years more. And so we've been busy for about 2 years, meaning we are narrowing in on half time. So there's already a little bit to report, and there's also a lot of work still ahead. Right, so here's the global setup of the MaRDI consortium. Basic idea is that the setup is structured along the data types that people are dealing with. So task area 1 is the computer algebra, where typically the data consists of integer values that can be computed exactly, but often with very high computational effort. Then in task area 2, scientific computing, we are starting to talk about rounding errors, inexact computations. So everything that involves floating point numbers, basically. Task area 3 adds uncertainty to the picture. So everything that is statistical methods, machine learning is covered by this task area. And then to complete the picture, in task area 4, the interplay with the other consortia is organized. So interdisciplinary mathematics, where essentially all the difficulties of all the 3 task areas before are combined in applications. And obviously, there's a lot that these task areas still have in common, although the data types are possibly very different. But all of them somehow deal with algorithms of the one type or the other. Somehow mathematical models in terms of equations describing phenomena are involved. And an important ingredient, especially when we think about what the topic of your network is, reproducibility, standardized workflows are an important measure to achieve things like reproducibility in the first place. So workflows are an important contribution in all of these task areas in the first place. And then the work that all these task areas have done and the results they have achieved are then supposed to enter into one general portal that is consolidating the services that others have generated in their task areas, but also creating their own services, like the ability to search for formula in online publications, for example, on arXiv, which is a big topic that they are currently working on. Then, especially for mathematics, a lot of work has to go into the communication with the people, the application scientists or the mathematical scientists. So data culture and community integration is another important layer in the entire concept, because while for everyone that is participating in a seminar like this, it's probably very clear that we all have data that define our research and that needs to be preserved and described in ways that other people can use them again. Especially in basic mathematics, often people are not even aware of the data that they actually have in their research, and that their papers, their formulas, their equations are in the end also data that is important to be described and preserved. And then obviously none of these gigantic project clusters can work without a proper governance. So there's a separate task area for this. And then obviously all these are somehow connected to other consortia inside the National Research Data Initiative. And what's now special about task area 2? What are we working on? since we are talking about scientific computing, obviously all sorts of models are important. We have certain inputs that we feed into these models. We want to deal with outputs they produce. We want to be able to visualize all of them, and these are all connected. But they are first connected in a practical and abstract way, and part of the measure 1, the knowledge graph of numerical algorithms, is to connect all these in like a more rigorous way via a knowledge graph that can then describe which algorithm has been invented in which paper, used in which other paper, applied to which kinds of data, such that it allows for an easy search from one of these objects to another. So given you have a specific mathematical problem and you're searching for a solver for that, you can ask this graph, for example, also for software that provides solvers for this. Measure 2, the open interfaces, is essentially dealing with the problem that somehow all these software packages need to talk to each other. And this is usually not done in very standardized ways. And coming up with standardized ways to do so and possibilities to parse data without too much overhead is dealt with here. Then in measure 3, we are concerned with the benchmark framework, and I'll be talking about that for the rest of the talk, so I'm not going on into much details here. And measure 4 then is about workflows. While benchmarking is essentially one specific workflow, there are obviously a lot of different workflows that come up in scientific computing, and creating tools to document workflows and to describe them in ways that fulfill the FAIR principles is what this measures is concerned with. The entire MaRDI structure is then also sort of connected to this layer structure here, where the classic terms findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability come back into play and are connected to the different types of approaches, whether it's just knowledge, or it's about the data, or the exchange. And obviously in the core, interoperability is the important asset. And the benchmark measure we see is, on the one hand, in the data section, because somehow benchmarking is also about providing reference models that people can use to test their stuff. But on the other hand, it's also all about interoperability between software packages and data, and putting all this into a standardized workflow. Obviously, MaRDI is not doing all this alone, and I've said that especially task area 4, but also the measure 4 inside task area 2 is very much concerned with interdisciplinary mathematical work. So there are all kinds of other consortia around us in all kinds of disciplines. So there's data science, there are the engineering sciences, there's materials, computer science, economics, catalysis and chemistry, but also probably more unexpected in the first place, the NFDI for culture is represented as one of the direct neighbors in all these 27 consortia in total. Right, so what is this MaRDI mark? The the benchmarking measure all about. So the idea is to be able to find a way to make benchmarking well, more fair in terms of, or in the ways of the fair principles, but also more fair in small letters, being able to fairly compare new algorithms to existing ones, for example, due to having access to implement existing implementations and not having to come up with a crude implementation of the competing algorithms while we have invested years in our own. So the idea is to make all this more easily accessible for the bigger picture community. And in order to do that, we want to, on the one hand, have something that is a generic toolkit or sort of a toolkit specification. We are not going to come up with an implementation that covers all disciplines and all areas of mathematics. That's infeasible, but we want to come up with building blocks and specifications for these building blocks that enable a community to come up with their own comparison measures and tools. And all of this is supposed to be as language agnostic as possible. In order to do so, we've identified 5 major objects that we somehow need to have in such a benchmarking workflow. On the first point, obviously, we need basic data sets that are our raw data that we want to apply the algorithms and methods on. So raw data are basic data plus their metadata descriptions. Then we have methods that come as codes, executables. Basically, this is where the algorithms are hidden, but in here, what we are looking at is what we usually call an algorithm isotope, so a very specific implementation of an algorithm with its parameterization such that it becomes a unique object. Then somehow these two need to be combined, and that's the task of the driver. And obviously there are then connections to the other measures. The knowledge graph will be able to give us candidates for data sets for specific algorithms or vice versa, find based on the data sets that we are aiming at the corresponding algorithms that we can apply and the isotopes that we can feed into the driver. This will do the computations. An additional analysis module is then supposed to check performance measures on the results. And a final module is for the distillation of the results in user-readable form. So in the form of some sort of result browser. And here again are the layers where this is actually contributing to. Then I already mentioned the knowledge graph is important to combine problems and methods for the driver. The open interfaces will be infeasible. The open interfaces will be super important for the connection and especially the language agnostic implementation of something like this. So there are strong connections. And in order to be able to get comparable results, we will need some sort of a database of curated benchmarks or benchmark data sets, to be precise, where all this is supposed to run on. And that's essentially what the next section is all about. The one direction of the scientific computing area that the two groups in task area 2 are working on is model order reduction. And so what we are at the moment focusing on, and that's then the next section in the measure 3, is to come up with a tool that does this benchmarking workflow for model order reduction applications. And we have already for quite a long time been trying to curate benchmarks in a certain way in the model order reduction wiki. And that's just a community platform that's been running for roughly 10 years now, where we do collect benchmarks, but we also describe methods. And we have a list of available software packages that implement these methods, but also collect the relevant publications, for example. And in order to be able to have a good collection of benchmarks, we have certain submission rules that already make sure that the models follow certain standards so that maximum interoperability is achieved by that. And you can find it at modreduction.org. So what services does it provide? As I said, we have basic descriptions of the basic methods there. Obviously, that cannot cover all the tiny details, and that's where the literature collection is for. But at least for a beginning user that wants to enter the field or apply these things to their own applications, this is a good starting point for reading. Then we have a collection of curated benchmark examples, and these come with a lot of pros and cons at the moment, and I get to that. Then we have these different model reduction software packages that where we also have a big table that shows which package is applicable where and so on. So at the first glimpse, you can get an impression which might be important for you. This is probably going to get replaced by the knowledge graph from measure 1 once that is fully equipped with data. And we have model reduction literature as well. What have we learned from collecting all these things over the last 10 years? That it is really difficult to make people contribute. Because making a model become a benchmark requires quite some extra effort. And to go down that road, a lot of things come into consideration, and to really engage the community, you need low contribution barriers. So we tried to make the access as simple as possible. We tried the simplest formats that you can think of, small rule sets. So the submission rules are a full page, but we try to keep them as precise as necessary, but as vague as possible to not scare people off too early. One important point that we've run into is licensing. So we have a lot of benchmark examples in there that have been generated 15, 20 years ago when nobody was talking about open content licenses, open data licenses. And now really getting proper licensing for those done to be able to publish them on, say, Zenodo as a central platform where we want to have all these examples such that they can properly be referred to at some point is a bit of a problem. And also for newer benchmarks, again, people only go the extra 2 steps of curating their stuff such that they can put it onto something like Zenodo for proper citation, if they have incentives to do so. So if people start actually citing these benchmark data sets just like they would cite a publication that maybe describes it. And so changing the citation culture there, and that's not only true for data sets, but just the same for software. We need to get away from software ending up in some sort of footnote, but being a proper reference in the reference list. And that's true for both. But coming up with incentives for the contributors in that case is a difficult task, and we still don't have the perfect solution for these kinds of things, but we're working. So licensing, it's exactly what I talked about. We have these old data sets from the Slycott collection, dating 2002 to 2006, then the Oberwolfach collection around 2005. And the least of those have licenses attached to them. But then also assembling metadata, useful metadata for these kinds of examples can be tedious. There are simple things like pure dimensions and things like that that are easy to figure out, but then others like model properties that are difficult to compute or expensive to compute, they might be more difficult to add in these kinds of metadata collections. So the question is always what to make mandatory, what to make optional, and which properties are actually interesting for people. And that's where community feedback is obviously, again, very, very necessary. And then all this is supposed to support the model auto reduction benchmarker. And since the majority of the examples that we have in the model reduction wiki so far are somehow linear time invariant dynamical systems or parametric linear time invariant dynamical systems, either given in this formulation of an ordinary differential equation with some output equation, or in this form as a rational function in frequency space. So that's the main reason why we have, for the first version of MORP, decided to focus on those, and most of the software that we have for LTI systems has been written in MATLAB in the first place. So we started off with a simple proof of concept type of implementation of this benchmark framework description in MATLAB for these simple kinds of examples, to get some feedback from the community, whether we are doing on the right track, whether we are missing something, or anything like that. Right. While we have taken a lot of effort already in the first place for the last 10 years in MoreWiki to have everything in specified data formats, over the years, the examples got so large that the purely text-based description of the matrices just got too large, and we needed to come up with something that still is general enough to not break interoperability, but allows for smaller storage of these examples. And we decided for the MATLAB.mat format that can be read via libmat in all kinds of other programming languages. But now ensuring that all these data sets are encoded uniformly, that all the different matrices, and like here these coefficient matrices E, A, B, C, D, in many cases they are called like this. Electrical engineers like to call them differently, where C is popping up in the ODE already because it's the matrix that describes the capacitors in an electrical circuit. So making sure that all these examples follow a standardized naming scheme and a standardized storage format such that all these packages can actually work with them was a bit of a tedious task. And then since the open interfaces measure is not yet at the end of phase one, obviously calling external software somehow as black boxes, but not adding too much overhead. Just think of calling MATLAB from Python. If you have to have the MATLAB startup times in there, this is going to be a nightmare. Finding ways to work around this, as long as we cannot simply pass data via the open interfaces, is obviously a lot of work as well. And then I mentioned algorithm isotopes. What is a unique implementation of an algorithm? Is a simple function in a specific programming language already enough? Actually, in most cases, not, because they come with like tons of parameters, tolerances, and so on and so forth that we need to fix in order to be able to say, okay, this is now one thing that is very unique, and for reproducibility purposes, this is necessary in the first place, but for comparability of the results, this is just as much important. And then, yeah, actually finding subroutines that can compute all the measures that we want to observe is a rather challenging task as well, because for some, there are just no really efficient ways to compute properties. A lot of stuff is already there. We have a good set of metadata for these systems, like symmetry, stability, passivity, contractivity, etc., that partly can already be computed, partially we still search for feasible ways of collecting all this data. Then the mentioned interns, Alexander Starger and Malte Speidel, have worked on a separate knowledge graph and ontology and connected search tool for these benchmarks and algorithms on these benchmarks to combine data sets with the implementations. We have a lot of different, or a couple of different packages that our algorithm isotopes come from, most of which are somewhere developed in the one or the other of the two involved groups, and the control systems toolbox is a proprietary part of MATLAB. I'll skip the ontology. This list is probably unreadable on your screens, but the important thing is that there are a ton of columns, so we have collected quite a few different metadata objects for all these benchmarks. The tool itself is configured via JSON files that specify which algorithm isotopes from which type of software package with which types of specific tolerances are run. But also, for example, and on which model. But for example, also what output measures are we actually interested in for this specific type of comparison? And then this whole thing compiles a long report that, for example, measures timings and errors. But it can also produce plots that are relevant for the systems theory community, like Bode diagrams, sigma magnitude plots, and things like that. And all that ends up in a LaTeX report that is auto-generated from the driver environment, comes with rather simple formatting, and contains also the system information about the platform that all this has been running on, such that the end product of your run is a PDF document that you can easily share. And the majority of this is in a tech report that can easily be used, copy and paste for the corresponding publications that are in mathematics, usually written in LaTeX in the first place. Things are still not where they should be. We want all the benchmarks on Zenodo for proper referencing and to offload stuff from our own servers because space gets cramped quite quickly. But I mentioned the licensing issues connected to this. The Morbo graph that we have now is supposed to be integrated into the algorithm knowledge graph algodata produced in measure 1. Everything's supposed to get integrated into the MoreWiki, obviously, and a lot of refactoring has to be done. So we get away from the MATLAB prototype to something that is a bit more interoperable in Python, for example. Right, and that brings me to my final section, MathBench. Now, we've concentrated quite a lot in what we've seen so far on model reduction and linear time invariant systems. But in this specific endeavor, we were much more interested in what's available in general. So what's the current status of mathematical data collections? And we've searched for data collections that somehow are related to benchmarking in mathematics. So that either claim they have benchmark results, or they have benchmark data sets, or collect benchmark run information in some sense. And we've compiled a list of, I think, 45 collections that are somehow fulfilling one of these criteria, so that somewhere claim they do something with benchmarking. And then we were interested in a lot of things, one of them being what licenses are the data shared under? Because obviously we had quite some trouble with non-existing licenses, and it turns out that this seems to be a rather global problem. If we look at those that actually have licenses attached to their data and the metadata, most of these use rather standard licenses, which is already great. Only a few come up with their own license creations that may make things difficult for people in the legal department. One thing that is also kind of not so nice is we looked at how do these data sets actually want to be referred to. And most of them are shared under some sort of URL, and we all know how unstable those are and how quickly those can change, and how much more desirable it would be to actually have something like a DOI attached to the data sets. Main reason why we want to go to Zenodo with all the mod reduction things. So that's also not very nice in that respect. And then we started using the Fuji FAIR score generator, and we fired that up on all these collections, and we checked what the average FAIR scores for those were that this tool would spit out. And well, it's also sort of devastating. A big part had a very bad score of around 0%. A few do rather well already, and then there's a bunch of things in an okay range. If we look at the findable, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability scores separately, the picture for findability is already quite good. Accessibility is okay-ish, and only the others are rather bad. This is just picking the homepage links that the datasets gave us. Now looking at only those who had GitHub or Zenodo specifiers, the picture already looks quite a lot better. So people that already use the appropriate modernish tools already do quite a bit better. And also the findability and accessibility scores are really good on those. Reusability seems to be really good as well. There is a bit of a difficulty on the interoperability, but that partly also is due to the Fuji tool being very picky about what they accept as interoperable data sets. Then we wanted to know a bit more about where in the math areas this actually is, and in order to do so, we looked at the mathematical subject classification, which assigns numbers to certain fields. And if we look at the first three and the last two here, the first three are numerical analysis, computer science, operations, research, and mathematical programming. So sort of to be expected that the very applied and interdisciplinary focused ones are doing rather well already, while more abstract things, and these are only the top 30, so there are things that are even worse than this, where areas that are not even present in the collections. All right, and that basically brings me to the end. I promised that there would be more names and more faces in the very beginning. Here's everyone in the current TA2 team. So these are the people, if you run into them on conferences, you can talk to about all the other things as well. And with that, thank you for your attention.